Friday, but our special guest, who you'll be hearing from very shortly, because of her state senatorial duties in Michigan, was called to duty. We moved it to today. So I've got a little of the good red, new Saperavi grape going. Oh, nice. Hope you'll join me. By the way, tasting this wine, as we've said on previous shows, serves a double function. You can smell it, and you can taste it, and you probably don't have COVID. So there's a double use to having a nice cocktail with me. So join in. Remember to that this is an interactive show. That if you'd like, you can dial in or Zoom in and ask a question after the interview. We're not going to be accepting calls during the interview, but these are the URLs and phone numbers if you'd like to Zoom in or call in and ask a question. We're going to be covering today a topic that really nobody else around here wants to cover. And that's all this election integrity, election madness stuff, all these rumors going on the left and the right. You don't know what to believe. In today's media, unfortunately, you don't know who to believe. You don't know what to believe. I don't even trust people on my side of the aisle on the news side, and I certainly don't trust people on the left side of the aisle on the news side. There shouldn't be any sides of the aisle on the news side, but there are, just like there shouldn't be any judges on either side of the aisle. John Roberts was right theoretically when he said there's no Obama judge or Trump judges, but there are. There shouldn't be, but there are. And there shouldn't be that way in the media. And they should be telling the truth rather than picking sides. So we're going to cover today some, I don't know what you want to call them. A lot of people call them conspiracies, rumors. I don't call them either one. These are constitutionally available, legitimate paths that the president's team is exploring and they're constitutionally utilizing. Most of these, if not all of these, have been done in the past, often by Democrats in the past. We'll explain that later. But the point is, these are really interesting issues. These are really interesting challenges. They're news. Just because the local media and national media doesn't want them to ever become true, the fact that they could become true, the fact that they are constitutional and not crazy lame-brained conspiracies, because these are constitutional angles. These are legislative angles that we're going to be exploring today. Doesn't make them not news just because you don't like it. It certainly doesn't make it news if it's an unfounded conspiracy theory that you do like. We're not going to be doing that either. But it's still news. So we're going to talk about what's going on in the state of Michigan. Michigan has been in the news a lot lately with a senator from that state, Senator Ruth Johnson. And we're going to be with her in just a couple of minutes. So stay tuned. She's been kind enough to join us on it. But after the show, after the interview, I should say, we're going to talk about just have a discussion. Hopefully you'll join in on some of the really great constitutional and civic lessons that we're learning about. They really are sometimes arcane, but even level of detail that's in the Constitution that allows for some of these challenges to happen. And you know how it is with Donald Trump, whether you like him or not, whether he's right or wrong, he's going to leave no stone unturned if he's got a constitutionally available option. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to start with Michigan. Tomorrow on our show, same time, 4 p.m. We're going to be talking about the state budget. Our guest tomorrow is going to be an executive from the Rhode Island Department of Revenue. We're going to talk about exactly how this budget was put together. They just, as you know, the governor has I don't know if she signed it yet, but the House and the Senate passed a massive budget, $12.7 billion budget for our state. I don't know where all the revenues come from. I just don't understand. So I think it's going to be Paul Dion, who's an executive with the Rhode Island. I don't know. We'll get his title tomorrow. Will be informing us exactly how the budget was put together. Okay, we're in the dugout. And as you know, we wear caps in the dugout. So I had mentioned, many shows ago that, I haven't played for the Red Sox in another life. I didn't even have a Red Sox cap. Well, some viewer was kind enough to send me a cap. So here's my Red Sox cap for in the dugout. And, that led me and Larry, the Liberty guy, our producer, to think, that might be a cool feature. So if you have a cap you would like me to wear on the show, it's got to be legitimate. It could be a sports team. It could be a son or daughter's little league team. It could be an organization you're involved with. I don't care. Just a cap, a nice baseball cap. As long as it's not too goofy looking. Send me a note with it, and I'll be happy to give you some credit on the show, and I'll wear it for that show. And the address is pretty simple. It's on our About Us page, the address, if you want to look it up there on our website at rifreedom.org. Or you can just send it. It's a pretty easy address. P.O. Box 10069, right? P.O. Box 10069, Cranston, Rhode Island, 02910. Send me a cap, send me a note. We'll put it on air, and we'll see if we have any fun. All right, so we've got some really extreme views as to what happened regarding election integrity. Primarily focused on the presidential elections, but in Georgia and in Michigan for sure, there were some senatorial races that were impacted as well, or could be impacted if anything of substance is discovered. But again, and on the Trump side, here's the two views. On the left and in the media, you've got to stick your head in the sand. Nothing happened. Nothing to see here. It was the most clean and perfect and highest integrity election of our lifetimes. We know that's a bunch of baloney. But on the right, we also have very prominent people. I mean, surprisingly prominent people. Lynn Wood, a very prominent attorney. Rudy Giuliani, so many others, making really amazing claims that hard to believe they're true. And if they are true, well, none of us even want to believe it. But they're not just saying it, they're tenaciously defending it and filing action after action. Almost unthinkable claims. I mean, and there has been a lot of evidence brought forth in hearings and state legislative committees. There haven't been any court hearings yet because no court has agreed to hear any of this information. I think that should happen. We'll talk about why in a second. There have been hundreds, if not thousands, of affidavits signed and there have been some really crazy ideas put out there by the alternative media on the right and even by some of these credible people. So what do you believe? You got one side saying there's absolutely nothing here. You got another side saying basically Armageddon is coming to this country once the truth is exposed. And as always, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. And listen, it's important we pursue these allegations, not so much because of it will determine this presidential outcome, but we just need fair and free elections. We all know that. We have to fix this for the future. We cannot be having this level of distrust in the future anymore. It just can't happen. And there's one guy. I try to give this guy a little bit of leeway. We had him on our show a few weeks ago. He's a Board of Elections, former board member of the Rhode Island Board of Elections, who just wants you to think that everything that goes on there is pristine. We had him on the show when we promoted our show today. Here's the ridiculous social media moron answer we got from this guy. This is typical of the one view. There's nothing to see here, and anybody that even talks about it like I'm doing right now is a conspiracy theorist, and we need to get a life. We need to fix. We know there has been irregularities. We know there has been some level of fraud. How much? I don't know. Enough to overturn anything? I don't know. I have no idea. But enough that we've got to fix it for the future. There's absolutely no question about that. If we have 30, 40, 50, 60% of our population does not believe that our elections are free and fair, what kind of democracy is that? Please tell me that. So it's important that we follow through on the most serious of these causes, even if it has nothing to do with determining this presidential outcome. All right, so again, we're about to go live. We're about to show you the interview we had with Senator Ruth Johnson, state senator from Michigan. She was former Secretary of State of Michigan for 8 years. and she chairs the Senate Elections Committee, so she knows. I hope you have a cocktail. Enjoy our interview with Senator Johnson. Don't forget that you can comment on the YouTube screen, or you can get ready to call in with a comment or question, or Zoom in at either one of these numbers, and we'll put this up again. But again, we spoke earlier today with Senator Ruth Johnson from the battleground state of Michigan. Okay, as we just mentioned, Michigan has become one of the epicenters of the election integrity questions. You know, where Pennsylvania might have been at the epicenter early on after the election. A lot of focus has shifted to Michigan. But we don't know what to believe and what not to believe. There's so many reports coming out of Michigan. So we're going to bring on somebody who knows. So let me introduce you to Michigan State Senator Ruth Johnson. Senator Johnson, welcome to In the Dugout. How are you today?
I'm doing great, and it's wonderful to be here.
All right, now you know our tradition. We're in the dugout. Now I knew what you were going to do. I've got my Red Sox cap on. What do you got going for me today?
I've got on my Detroit Tigers hat.
And why else wouldn't you? The great Detroit Tigers franchise. Love playing in Detroit. I played old Tiger Stadium. I've been to the new stadium, but I didn't play there. So anyway.
Yes, I'm sorry we had such a small locker room for you back on Trundle, but it was a great stadium. And the Detroit Tigers helped me a lot when I was Secretary of State. We went from one of the worst states in the nation to one of the best for gift of life, and they were a partner in that. That's terrific. Well, thank you for all your service to your state. You are, as you mentioned, you're now a state senator. You were former Secretary of State for the state of Michigan for 8 years. You were even one of the first women to be, or if not the first, as a county clerk in the county of Oakland, Michigan. And you are chair now of the Senate Elections Committee. So with all this talk about election integrity, I mean, you've pretty much been right in the middle of this, right? Okay. All right, we're going to do a batting practice round. I'm going to go through a whole bunch of questions, quick answers, yes or no, and then we're going to go back and dig into the more interesting ones of them. Okay, is that fair enough? I'll give it a try. All right, so you may have seen the report put out recently by Peter Navarro, who is a former White House or current White House advisor, and he lists the 6 swing states that are under question. And under Michigan, so I just want you to agree or disagree. He says there's some evidence, he just put a star, not a check mark there, of outright voter fraud. Agree or disagree based on what you know? There was some cheating, yes. Okay, ballot mishandling, agree or disagree? In some places, yes. Okay, contestable process fouls, like you didn't follow the proper process. In one large community, yes. Equal protection clause violations, where ballots in one county or one area were treated differently than ballots in another county. That's correct. Voting machine irregularities, come question Dominion or whatever. It was a clerk error, yes. All right, clerk error, we'll get into that. And significant statistical anomalies. There's been a lot of reports of these impossible spikes for Biden. Peter Navarro says that happened in Michigan. Do you agree? I have not been able to find that. Okay. Thank you. All right. Next, you've been involved in a lot of election process questions, both before and after the election. There have been hearings. There have been subpoenas. There's been a lot of media attention. Based, just quickly, again, we're still in batting practice. Based on what you know and what you've seen and heard, testimony, affidavits, did Michigan have a free and fair presidential and U.S. senatorial election? I will say this way, we had some cheating, but not enough to change the outcome of the election. Okay. Are there still hearings going on today? Yes. Are those hearings designed to have some impact on the presidential outcome or on future election integrity issues? On future election integrity at this point, but if they heard something else, they would do something different.
But at this point, they've had lots of information and lots of testimony, and it appears that we are looking at how to stop cheating, how to stop irregularities, and how to dig in on how our Secretary of State did not follow the laws.
Okay, we'll dig into that in a minute. A few more batting practice softballs, if I could. Now that the Electoral College has met and the votes have been sent to DC, if you mentioned if they heard something different, if something different were to come up, is there any role still for your legislature or any state legislature for that matter to still impact the outcome of 2020 president election, or is your role over now with regard to the past election?
Well, I feel confident that there isn't going to be a change in the outcome, that we will find that there were votes cheated and processes not used properly. But right now, I believe that that the outcomes will not be changed.
Okay, but if there was something evidence, is there a role left that you could potentially play, just constitutionally, is what I mean?
Yes, our Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey said that if for any reason that would be true, that we would step in, and I didn't get the details on how.
Okay, so there apparently is still okay. So if something, I agree, if something completely unknown to us now were to occur, there still could be a role for your legislature. Okay, you mentioned your current Secretary of State. Is it true that she refused to testify before recent Oversight Committee hearings?
The State House, yes.
At the State House, okay. Any reason why? Did she express a reason why?
The reason she gave seemed more like an excuse to me.
Okay. Now we also saw a report, and this is our last batting practice. Quick answer. Thank you for doing batting practice with us. Most people don't know how to keep it short, so thank you for that. The Dominion CEO apparently testified in front of Oversight Committee. Is that true?
Yes.
And was there anything, any major reveal there?
Well, the county clerk didn't load the updated software, which caused their election counts to be incorrect, and that was confirmed with those meetings. Okay.
All right. So now you can expound as much as you can on whatever comes up next, dear Senator. We're talking with Senator Ruth Johnson from the great state of Michigan. So Michigan was one of 7 states to send an alternative slate of pro-Trump electors to the U.S. Congress as a provision, I guess, just in case something extraordinary were to happen. And again, it's not unprecedented. This happened with President Nixon and President Kennedy in 1960, where the alternative slate ended up being the ones counted. And last month, you called for an independent audit of Michigan election results. If you could just summarize why, what's going on? Why did Michigan send the alternative slate, and why did you call for an audit?
I called for an audit because after reading the affidavits and reading as much as I could, and I have a fabulous staff member, Garrett Wheat, and he's gone through everything with a fine-tooth comb. And when we sit down, we believe that the Secretary of State spent over $11 million in federal COVID money to promote vote by mail rather than something that was really COVID related. And she sent unsolicited absentee ballot applications to 7 million people. And I believe that 800,000 or more went to people that had moved, largely moved, dead, non-citizens, and underage. And I asked people to send them to me, and I got 500 that represent that in that order.
Wow.
That's a big problem for me.
All right, so that sounds like the exact same thing that happened in our state. Let me tell you what happened in our state. You tell me how it happened in your state. In our state, left-wing advocacy groups sued the left-wing Secretary of State's office and Board of Elections to change the requirement for either a notary or 2 witness signatures on mail ballots. By executive order, our governor, decided to send out mail ballot applications to everybody on the voter rolls. Now, we know that the the Supreme Court has been basically saying that it's the state legislatures that are supposed to define the voting process, not bureaucrats, not the executive branch. Did that same kind of thing happen in Michigan?
The Secretary of State thinks she has the right to do it. It is the local clerks that have done it in the history of Michigan. We have 1,520, only when they've been asked for them. This is a whole change, and she did not get any legislation that would allow her to do that. I suspect that would end up in court because there's nothing that prohibits, but there's nothing that allows. And by the way, there was a court decision about 5 years ago that the local clerks could not send them out unless they were requested. And another problem is our voter rolls, we call the qualified voter file, has hundreds of thousands of people that are not qualified to vote. They're in a subsection that you're supposed to verify because in large part they've surrendered their license to another state. And those were marked and flagged, and she sent them to those people too. And if they voted in 2 states, we would never know.
Wow. So is there any case on that pending either in your state or before the Supreme Court?
Well, I asked as chair of elections in the Senate for her to do some auditing. She's not done that. And so that's why the House and the Senate went ahead with subpoena power. And that's why I asked in an affidavit so that we can have an independent audit done so that we can find out exactly what happened so that we can fix things. It's not unreasonable to want to fix things. We even had someone who obviously was trying to get the current president elected and called up into one of our cities and said, you don't have to vote on Tuesday, the lines are long, COVID's bad, you can come tomorrow. So we had bad actors, a few on both sides, but definitely the left was very organized in their efforts. They used the COVID money. There was from step to step to step to change things. And I think they used COVID basically as an excuse, and they
and without any approval or involvement of the elected representatives, state representatives of your state.
No, matter of fact, very reluctant to even come in and update us. It took me weeks and weeks to get her in, and then I asked for 3 hours, and she said she couldn't do that. It would only be a half an hour, and that we had a chance to ask one question. And I said, I don't need one question. So she answered a question. She's been very difficult to work with, and transparency has not been one of her big points in being.
You were Secretary of State. Would you have ever assumed an act, such powers were somehow inferred upon you?
I find it keeps me up at night. I just find it so horrible that our government, that people have given up so much. So we have this wonderful system. Because of COVID, we don't get much citizen input because we weren't able to have meetings, and she would not come in. She did it by Zoom, which is fine, but she limited the times and limited the time when she was there, but was not good about testifying so that we could stop some of this. And so I did ask for subpoena power, but they decided to wait until after the election and gave it to Senator Ed McBroom, and he's very qualified, and Matt Hall in the House. And so they've been conducting these. But I knew early on when there were hundreds of thousands of ballots that went out, I wanted to know if she was using the flagged voters on the qualified voter file, which means 99% are not qualified voters because they've moved, they've died, they've reported they're non-citizens, whatever it may be. We had one 16-year-old that got a hold of us and said, I'm not supposed to vote. Yeah. Luckily, they knew better than the Secretary of State. She also said she sent the invitations, I call them, to vote, the absentee ballot requests, to people that she knew had moved because they surrendered their driver's license, and they were pre-filled out forms. And so what she did was really opened up a route for people to cheat, and then also worked with Rock the Vote. And I had reports at the colleges that they were being told, you don't have to live in Michigan and you don't have to show a driver's license. You're supposed to show some kind of ID as long as you vote by mail. And by the way, I support, and we've always had vote by mail. We call it absentee voting.
Yeah.
But the
proactively requested, right? Yeah.
The devil's in the details, and she stripped out the checks and balances.
All
And
right,
the
she stripped it out. She did all these other things you mentioned. It's not within her purview. You sat in that seat as secretary. Is there any question in your mind that this was not a clear abuse of power?
To me, it's a clear abuse to strip out the integrity of our elections. And I believe she should have come to the legislature if she wanted to make great changes. There was an an executive order early on because of COVID. I'll tell you the worst thing about sending to people that we know that don't live here is she changed the definition, and instead of about 4-point type, you have all these different categories. One is verify, and the local clerks call them verify if somebody has surrendered their driver's license. She told them not to. Don't even check. Some of the clerks still did and found people trying to
So
vote.
they knowingly knew they were mailing to people who no longer lived in the state, and they just ignored it all.
They were on the qualified voter file, but it's verify, and then she changed the definition of to verify to treat them no differently than any other.
Going back to court cases, again, reports that there's I don't remember specifics, just true or false. We don't need a long explanation. There's a Sidney Powell, Michigan case now before the U.S. Supreme Court. Is that true?
I haven't kept up in the last couple of days. I don't know.
Okay, no problem. All right, let's just dig in. Last area. Let's just, before we summarize, let's just dig in a little bit to this Antrim County Dominion voting machine. There is which has really captivated most of the national attention, where the votes were flipped. Now, you had mentioned earlier that, I don't know if this is the same one you were referring to earlier when you said clerical error. That was the initial story. Now, a lot of people say it wasn't human error. It was something malicious code in the software itself. You know, this is a report that's out that a hand recount found out, you know, of this error. Is this true, and what really was the origin of this? Clerical or something a little more mischievous?
Yes, I think the clerk at the time called it a glitch. It got national leg.
Yep.
And unfortunately, I think we need to hone in on where the real problems are, because they just finished a hand count, I think, on Thursday. And the whole county, which is 16,000, it's a small county. I don't think you should be off one vote, but they were off 12. So 12 by hand counting compared to what the machines reported shows that there was no massive problem or breach in any way.
All right. So, which is true here? These numbers, Trump versus Biden, or the original numbers that had Biden winning? Which one ended up being true?
The clerk made a mistake and didn't update the software, and there was a substantial problem because of that. It was caught, and we since have done a hand count, and between what the final outcome was with the machines once the problem was fixed was 12 votes.
But again, it was originally reported that Biden won that county, right? And then it was found that clerical error produced thousands of mistakes, and it ended up Trump won that county. And then when they recounted, after they had swung it back to Trump, then they did a recount, and that's where the difference of 12 votes was. But initially, there were thousands of votes misplaced, misallocated because of that clerical error, correct?
That's correct. And we have systems to catch it, and it did.
All right. So do you have any reason to believe? Well, let me rephrase that. So are you personally 100% confident this was a clerical error, this was not malicious code, and that this does not indicate that there are other Dominion-related mischievous code going on throughout, that this isn't the tip of the iceberg of it nationally?
Yes, I think it was a clerk error. I think we always have to watch out for anything that can be done or hacked. And so that's good that we asked, it's good that we looked, because we know that, you know, we have had a massive hack recently, and I myself have had my, had all my data changed over to someone else, lost my identity, and had checks from the government sent to New Jersey and all kinds of things. So we always watch out for those things. And I'm really pleased that people do ask questions and do push for answers.
Well, thank you for clarifying so much, because again, as you don't know what to believe on the left or the right these days. You just don't. So you're right there in the middle of it. So let me give you the final word, final question. So when it comes to Michigan, would it be fair, and I'll have you correct me where I'm wrong, what I've just heard, would it be fair to say plenty of irregularities, probably some fraud, probably certainly a process that if not unconstitutional, was undesirable, but probably nothing that we can put our finger on that would change Michigan's election results as far as this election. But the reason you keep investigating is to make future elections with a much higher degree of integrity. You summarize in your words, was I incorrect in anything I said?
You were absolutely correct, and it was an excellent summary.
Anything else to add?
Other than we can't wait. We have big elections. Michigan is largely blue, but we swing back and forth. We had all Republicans in all the major offices last time. And if we don't get these things fixed, then people will and can cheat. Luckily, it's a very small amount, but they can have huge changes in outcomes. And so I said in my affidavit that this audit needs to be done ASAP, time we work it through and get it through the House, the Senate. And then, of course, we've got to get the governor to sign it. So we need to prove it so that she would have a hard time vetoing some of these things that I think we're going to be making as bills and hopefully laws.
But I was mistaken. I do need to ask you one thing that I asked you in the fast batting practice round. But all right, so why did, if you don't think there were enough votes to change the outcome, why did Michigan send the alternative slate of electors? And is it true that some of those lawmakers were locked out of the state house or barred from going in? I promise that's the last question.
Yes, in the Senate, we didn't have anything to do with the slate that was done by the House, and so I don't have the details on it.
So the House has a little bit of a different view maybe than you do on this?
I'm not sure it's different. They go about things much differently.
Okay. Senator Johnson, thank you so much for joining us in the dugout. Good luck to your Tigers in the off season, as to our Red Sox, and we wish you a blessed and happy Christmas.
Thank you for bringing truth to people so we can work on the areas that we really need to work on, and there's plenty.
We got to know the truth, Senator. Senator Ruth Johnson, State Senator, former Secretary of State from Michigan. God bless.
Sten, we're back.
Oh, that was a very, very interesting interview. Good news and bad news if you're on, depending on which side of the fence you sit on this. She, if you're a Trump supporter and are hoping for a big dominion, that Michigan was the tip of the iceberg, Senator Johnson pretty much shot down that. She is convinced that vote flip, in Michigan that we heard about right after the election and we've been hearing about since, she's convinced that was a clerical error as originally reported and not the tip of the iceberg. But on the other hand, remember her counterparts in the House, as she stated right there at the end of her interview, her counterparts in the House felt there was something substantial enough going on that they did need to send an alternative slate of electors up to Washington, D.C. in case that exposure happens. To those on the left who think that this was just a perfect election, there was no fraud, there was no illegitimate process or unconstitutional process, you're not going to be happy because clearly this state senator, who again chairs her Senate election committee in her state, pointed out and agreed with Peter Navarro, the president's advisor, that there are multiple different types of fraud, irregularity, and other problems going on with the election this year. She claims not in enough volume to have changed the presidential outcome. That's fine, that may be true. But to me, as I mentioned earlier, I'm much more interested and long-term integrity of United States elections and state elections than I am with who ultimately gets sworn in on January 20th to be the next president of the United States. So clearly, she believes, for anyone who believes this was a clean election, wrong. Did it happen in enough volume to change the world or change the country? She doesn't think so. And how do we know? We have no idea. A lot of people believe one way or another, but clearly there are issues that need to be fixed. All right, so we're going to open it up. We'd love you to post your questions on the Facebook, on the YouTube comments, or to Zoom in, or to call in. I see one question here from Republican RJL, and what was that question? Go ahead and type it or call in. Oh, when she says software updates, is this a vote count update or a system update? I don't know. It's a good question. She said that there were the original problems were because there was not the appropriate update to that machine, and somehow it miscalculated. It still sounds a little fishy to me, but that's what she said. I don't know any more detail than that. I didn't ask her that on air, obviously, and I don't know the answer from anybody else. There was fraud, no question. In Rhode Island, who knows? Nobody's looked. We don't have a General Assembly that functions anymore. We have a General Assembly that just does not want to engage. They will not engage in this COVID crisis. They will not be a check on power of the governor when it comes to unconstitutionally infringing on our rights in order to at least pretend to be battling this pandemic. And they certainly aren't going to intervene when it comes to elections, especially against the co-Democrat Secretary of State, who I believe did this state a great disservice. So there has been no inquiry. There has been no curiosity by the media or by any people, any legislators in power in the state. Obviously, those at the federal level and state level who lost elections had a lot of questions. We've had many of them on this show. But they're not the people in power. They're not the people who can influence what's going on. So we have no idea. I mean, I applaud those states for at least having investigations, pointing out irregularities, pointing out fraud that might have existed so they can fix it for the next time. Not so that they can get Trump in the office or get Biden in the office, but so they can fix it for the next time. Gosh, don't you wish we had that same level of curiosity in this state? All right, Larry the Liberty Guy, what do we got?
We have Roland on the line. Do you want to say hello?
Let's do a quick question or two from Roland, of course. Roland, welcome to In the Dugout. All right, what's going on with Roland?
Roland, you might have to unmute yourself. Roland should be a pro at this point now.
Hello?
No. Hey, there he is.
All right, well, hey, Roland, welcome back. You're on In the Dugout. What's your comment or question?
Mike, that was a very interesting conversation you had with Senator Ruth Johnson. I liked the way you did the batting practice first before getting deep into it. The question I was going to have, actually, I would have liked to have known. I just think of our own Nellie Gorbea, right? When she first took over as
Secretary of State Gorbea, yeah.
Yeah, they all claim they're going to cleanse the voter rolls, which didn't happen, as we saw in the primary. I think it had 160,000 undeliverable addresses, if I recall.
Yeah.
So it sounded like Senator Ruth Johnson did a lot of work when she was Secretary of State, because she kept mentioning the flag list.
Yeah.
The dead voters, ones that move, ineligible, et cetera, et cetera. And I was just curious that it would have been a predecessor to how she cleaned up her voter rolls to have better, more honest elections, even, requiring absentee ballots, to be requested instead of sent out. It's obvious that the Michigan Secretary of State that they have now, they did exactly what they did here in Rhode Island, as you pointed out.
They ignored those flags. I mean,
Well,
you heard
yeah,
what she said, right? They flagged all these people to be removed from the database, and yet this current Secretary of State ignored them and sent them unsolicited mail ballot applications anyway. What kind of corruption or incompetence is that?
Well, here's where I believe me, I found the discussion with her very interesting. You asked some very good questions, but I still feel she was a little bit, I don't know, following a line, because she said there wasn't enough to overturn the election, and then the but came in. But I wanted to do an audit, but there was a flag list, but in some counties. It's like, well, how can, it's kind of like the claims that, Lynn Wood makes, it kind of like out there. It's like, well, you can make all the claims in the world, but if you
let me
have
comment
the
on that. That's an awesome point. Roland, thanks again for calling in. Let me comment on that. So thank you very much.
Okay. All right.
All right. So, it sounds like to me, I mean, Newsmax today, backtracked. Hey, want to be clear, we've never made claims that Dominion this or this software that or Chinese that or this, they were very clear. So I think a lot of people are being very careful in what they say right now. Clearly the senator was careful, but she was clear in what she said. But here's what's going on, and here's my commentary. And that's a great point you bring up, Rolf. Think back first to the Russia collusion. The 3 or 4 years we went through that. All we heard were claims from Democrats, especially I can remember Adam Schiff saying it, and that idiot Swalwell, Representative Swalwell, saying it. We have the evidence. It's right there. We have the evidence. It's going to come out soon. We have the evidence that Trump colluded with Russia. And there never was any evidence. Ever. Wasn't even a shred of evidence. Nothing. Even Mueller's report confirmed that. Nothing. Why do they say that? Then for years we heard about the deep state behind it all, making all this stuff up, that there was no evidence. It was all a fabrication, and the Department of Justice, we heard it on Hannity and all the other shows, the Department of Justice was going to be acting soon, and here's this new piece of rumored evidence, and here's that new email and text between the lovers and whoever else, and the hammer's going to be dropped, and evidence is there, and this deep state conspiracy is going to be exposed, that they tried to get Trump, treason, and nothing came of it. Now, is it there? Was there any Russian collusion evidence there? Does the stuff just get buried, or are people just lying? And now we have, like you mentioned, Roland, Lynn Wood, and as I mentioned earlier, very prominent people. I mean, very prominent people. The head of Overstock.com, I can't think of his name right now. Lynn Wood, Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, so many others outside of the administration, outside of the campaign even, making these enormous claims that they have proof of fraud and they've got the evidence and the statistics. But it's never been presented. Yes, we had, at least there's evidence. We've had the hearings in Pennsylvania. We've had the hearings in Michigan. There's been hearings, I think, in Arizona, Wisconsin. I can't remember. There's the video in Georgia. So there is at least some evidence here of irregularities. But we have not seen that smoking gun that everyone claims they have that could blow this whole thing up. Where is it? Is it true? I mean, if you've been making... If Sidney Powell and those Trump supporters, even Trump himself, if they've been making claims of the magnitude that they're making, and these are, listen, I read this stuff not because I necessarily believe it's true, because I want to be informed, and because I want to inform you. And if we have a few minutes after this, I'll go through some of those things with you. But these claims are so serious that you better have the goods. You better be able to put up or just shut the hell up. You don't know what to believe. If indeed there was Dominion voter fraud, then obviously we got to fix it, and thank you for these people for coming forward. But if you've just been making it all up, hoping you would find something in the future, you've done it, again, like the media on the left, you've been doing this country a great disservice. None of us know what to believe. You got to show us the money. Show us the evidence. Show us the beef. I don't know. What I do know, and what I think everybody knows, and as the Senator Johnson from Michigan just said, there absolutely was enough documented fraud, irregularity, and other kind of unconstitutional, unlawful process and actions that went on that have to be fixed before we have another election, regardless of whether it has any impact on the Biden-Trump outcome. We must fix these. They're there, they're real, and she and her colleagues in the Michigan legislature are having hearings now to fix things in the future. Don't you wish we could have that in Rhode Island? Does anybody have any integrity in our state? Does anybody have any curiosity in our state? In the media? Among elected officials? Or do we just toe the line and follow the party line and pretend that everything is hunky-dory like this Steve Erickson guy does? Nothing to see here. My God. Listen, we know this stuff has been going on for centuries, and I mean that, centuries in our country. How many of you knew that there was an attempt to defraud Abraham Lincoln via mail ballots? Did you know that? In the 1860s, over 150 years ago. Yes. Back then, during the Civil War, the soldiers got to vote. They had rights to vote too, and they had, I don't know if it was mail, but they had their own, remote ballot system where they could vote from the front lines or their camps or wherever they were. And apparently, the Democrats tried to falsify many of those in favor of former General McClellan in later campaigns. Both during the Civil War and after the Civil War. Or for the Democrat candidate. So this stuff has been going on for a long time. It's just a question. We find new ways to try to commit fraud, and we have to find new ways to stop them. It's a continual process. But that process in Rhode Island isn't working because there is no curiosity. There is no integrity in the General Assembly. There is no integrity among state officials in the state. And the courts also just seem to go along to get along. And there is a case. Rhode Island had a clear case of changing election law without the will of the General Assembly. And the federal, the state court, the federal courts, all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, nothing to see here, even though it's clearly unconstitutional. This government is not serving the people. It just is not. All right, so we got about 10 minutes left. Let's take just a quick review, a layman's term. Listen, I'm not a constitutional expert. Appreciate the Constitution. I believe in the Constitution. I read it, but more importantly, I read what other experts say about it, the Constitution, as it applies. Now, we do have a case, I'm sure most of you know, where 7 other states, as I mentioned in an interview with Senator Johnson, sent what they call dueling electors to Congress. The officially certified electoral college votes were tabulated last week. Former Vice President Biden is now the official president-elect, but it's not done with until January 6th, when the U.S. Congress actually says which electoral votes are we going to count. And there are 7 sets from the 5 battleground states plus Nevada and New Mexico sent an alternative slates. Again, in 1960, Kennedy-Nixon election. Originally, Hawaii was deemed to have gone to Nixon. Hawaii didn't agree with that. So they sent an alternative slate of electors to Congress. And on January 6th, enough evidence had came out and somebody objected to the Hawaii electoral count that was officially, or at least initially submitted to the Electoral College. They had a debate. They deemed that enough new evidence had come forward that showed that Hawaii actually went to John Kennedy, and that alternative slate of electors ended up for Kennedy, not Nixon, ended up being the ones counted. So again, this is constitutional. It's in the Constitution, and there is precedent for it. So these 7 states did their job. They felt there were problems in their states. They weren't able to present enough evidence to overturn the Electoral College on December 14th, or whatever date that was. But they put them in just in case something occurs. As the senator said, unless something happens, unless new information comes out, they put in, and if that information comes out, it's a big if. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's a big if. They've got their backup electors in place. As you also heard the senator say, if that new information comes out, even I guess if it was on a slate that sent alternative electors, state legislators still have they can still, I guess the term would be claw back. They can still claw back those electors if something magnanimous were to become evident or proven in their states. Ultimately, the state legislatures do have the final say. I'm guessing here, but if let's just say, well, let's take Rhode Island, for instance. Let's just play around with the idea that something magnanimous happened in Rhode Island. The legislature could meet and say, we're going to pull back those 4 Biden electors. Now, since there are no Trump electors to replace them with, because we didn't send an alternative slate, it would just be deducted from Biden and not added to Trump. And again, all this plays out in the end. So that's the way I would assume that would happen. So there is a role for still state legislatures. And then there's the ultimate and most unthinkable almost, but still technically constitutional avenue available. Now, the president has denied it. Military leaders have said they would not comply with it. But there is an Insurrection Act that could be in the Constitution, could be invoked. Well, the term martial law is not in the Constitution. By invoking the Insurrection Act, it would sort of put martial law into effect, and I'll tell you what that means in just a second. But if the president deems, the president has the right to say this country is under attack, either foreignly or domestically, cyber attacks, China virus attacks, I don't know. He could invoke the Insurrection Act. He could suspend habeas corpus, which is your right to appear before a judge before you're put in jail. You can't just be imprisoned in this country for no reason without some kind of due process. President Lincoln suspended habeas corpus during the Civil War. Okay, so again, these things are not unprecedented, and they are, in a way, constitutional. If not specifically enumerated, it is constitutional. Now that's a huge. I mean, many people think that's going to happen. The president's going to invoke the Insurrection Act and establish some kind of martial law. By martial law, we don't mean tanks rolling down the street. What we mean by that is that where civil courts don't have the capacity anymore or the political desire to hear cases, then cases would be heard in military courts under military rules of evidence and process. I can't believe that would ever happen. That could only happen if everything you heard about the deep state were true. And there are hundreds and hundreds of proven cases of treason or insurrection that we would trigger martial law and the Insurrection Act, because you would have to claim that because of the attack, domestically or foreign, that the regular system, the civil system, is in such chaos and is compromised so much, and only military justice can help sort things out. And I hope we never get to that point. But again, if that deep state, it's a big if. I'm not saying it's happening. But if that deep state is as big and as pervasive as some people claim, it might be the only avenue. Let's go to finally to the U.S. Congress. Let's dig into that again. So, and then we'll end our show, and I thank you. So on January 6th, and that's one day after the January 5th elections, runoff Senate elections in Georgia. If there is this mass action, if the President Trump is going to take some action, as the left has feared for a long time that he won't leave office without a fight. Now, I don't think it's because he's being a baby about it. If he really believes there was some kind of massive fraud, systematic fraud, treasonous fraud going on, and he can prove it, he better damn well be able to prove it. He would call for something big to happen, but it would have to happen, in my view, the day after the January 5th elections. Otherwise, he would throw those elections into chaos. And that's the last day it could come out, because January 6th is the day that the United States Congress approves and officially counts the Electoral College votes. Do we take all the ones officially submitted, or do we go with any of these alternative slate of electors? So if something big is going to happen, and again, I don't think it is, because we haven't seen that evidence. We just haven't seen it. Yes, there has been fraud. Yes, there has been irregularities. Yes, there has been unconstitutional executive and bureaucratic action. But we simply have not seen the actual evidence presented in a formal way in a court system or anywhere else. We've heard a lot of claims of it. We've seen a lot of people analyze stuff, but we haven't seen it yet that proves it. If any of that is there, you got one day to make the case, the evening of January 5th into January 6th. My God. I don't know. If all that bad stuff is true, then it has to happen. But if it's not true, or it's not even largely true, let's just move forward. Let's just make sure we fix things for the next election. But on January 6th, they will do a roll call of the states, led by the Vice President, Mike Pence. As each state's electors are announced, if one senator and one U.S. senator and U.S. congressperson, you need one of each, says, I object to, let's just say, take, for instance, Michigan's Electoral College votes. You need one of each, and each session goes away for 2 hours, no more than 2 hours to debate. What's the evidence that's presented? Do we accept the original slate of electors submitted by that state? Do we accept the alternative slate? Or do we just say, can't decide, nobody's going to get these electoral votes? Those are the three options. That happened, like we said, in 1960 with Kennedy and Nixon in the state of Hawaii. In 2016, members of the Democrat Party tried in the House, I can't remember which state, tried to object to an electoral vote in one state. But there was no corresponding senator to go along with that. So the debate did not move forward. So that process will go through state after state. If there are multiple states to be contested, and we already have members of the U.S. House who say they will contest. Nobody from the Senate, U.S. Senate, has said so yet. So it's unclear if any of that will even happen. But folks, this is constitutional, right? This is not crazy conspiracy theory. This is not Trump making stuff up, acting outside the law. This is a great civics lesson. This is what our Constitution allows. And who knows if it's going to happen? I'll tell you right now, if they do contest, there's not enough evidence out there to add into that debate that I don't think would convince the whole House or the whole Senate to go along with switching or denying electoral votes to Joe Biden. It's just not there yet, in my view. But again, this is news. This is constitutionally available. It's legal. It's happened before, but yet your news media won't report it to you. Then when it's all done, when they've determined, we'll see. Does anybody meet the 270 threshold? Based on whether there's any realignment of electoral college votes, whether it's flipping them from Biden to Trump, or whether it's just pulling them away from Biden to Trump. Does anybody reach? And if not, then it really gets complicated. I'm not even going to go into that now. And the election gets thrown to the United States Congress to decide. And there's a couple of different scenarios there as well, but we won't get into that. But again, this is all such great civics education. It's all legal. It's all constitutional. Trump, maybe Trump and the Republicans may be paying a political price for exploring these avenues. And they should pay a political price if they've been feeding us nothing but BS for the last, 45 days. But if they're right, they do have these constitutional avenues to play. Last comment. Do you remember how 4 years ago, after the election, that the Democrats and the left were trying to convince Trump electoral college members to switch their votes and vote for Hillary? So don't think this is just the Republicans doing something non-pristine. The Democrats tried it 4 years ago. This is what politics is. I play hardball, you play hardball. Republicans play hardball, Democrats play hardball. Sometimes you throw a knockdown pitch. This is hardball. And if you're too weak to be in the game, then get out of the damn game. Both sides do it. This president is doing nothing that's unconstitutional at this point. Some of these are very extreme, but the Constitution allows for extreme things. In summary, we must follow these paths because we must have high integrity elections in our states, regardless of what happens to this presidential. And gosh, do I wish we had some kind of integrity, some kind of curiosity in our state. In the dugout, Mike Stenhouse, wishing you good day. We'll see you tomorrow when we talk about the state budget. Good day. The fat state budget.